It's the Underdogs back with you. I'm Jordan Brenner, joined as always by Peter Keating. A little later in the show, we're on the eve of the Little League World Series, but we're going to talk about one aspect of Little League that may be set to kill underdogs. But first, Peter, last week we talked about the NFL teams that could be on the rise. This week, it's under time, baby.
Jordan, I've said this before. It's time, you apply some analytics in the preseason. You're going to be a little more pessimistic than the whole crowd. Everyone's optimistic this time of year. They think their rookie's going to be rookie of the year. They think their team's not going to get hurt. Let's throw some water on some parades, Jordan. Let's bring some reality to these forecasts.
Right, and this makes this a special bonus extra time segment of the Under of the Week. Under of the Week is brought to you by DraftKings. Dive into all the action with our partners at DraftKings Sportsbook. New customers bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets instantly. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code UNDERDOGS only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. So, Peter, normally we pick one under, but this week we've got a few as we're going through NFL teams that we feel like, for whatever statistical reasons, aren't going to live up to their win totals. And just for some context, PK, nothing tells you the story of parity in the NFL quite like win totals. 13 of the 32 NFL teams have projected win totals of 8.5 or 9.5. So more than a third of the league is projected to be right around 500. If you expand that to between 7.5 and 10.5 wins, you've got 21 of 32 teams. So as it is,
there's a mushy middle, Jordan, and this is really, this has developed in the past 10 years. Rising injuries plus rising parity gets you an awful lot of teams bouncing up and down in between those 6 and 10 win seasons.
And that's the key thing. So we've used several metrics the past couple of years in projecting turnarounds or teams falling off beyond just, so-and-so signed with this team and the Eagles got Saquon Barkley. So looking at schedule strength, rest advantages and disadvantages, injury luck the year before, you can sort of get a sense of where teams may have overperformed a year ago. And of course, Pythagorean record, which is based on point totals, what a team's projected record should have been as opposed to their actual win total. So we use a lot of that in sort of looking at which teams may have over or underachieved last year and whose over-unders this year might be out of whack. So is there anyone who really sticks out to you at the beginning as we try to find some teams that are going to fall under their win totals?
I hate to say this because I picked them and was happy to do so and was kind of right. I'm not as right as you picking CJ Stroud and Houston to overperform last year, but I liked the Colts to overperform last year, and they went from 4 to 9 wins. Here's the thing that happens with teams that improve by that much. The team itself, its executives, its fans, its players believe now we're on the right path. We're zooming ahead. But all the forces that they don't kind of give enough credit to for helping them along the way kind of bounce back or revert or go away. And there's a big drag on teams that improve that much. I think the Colts are going to have a lot of trouble meeting their over of 8.5 this year.
They did re-sign a ton of their own free agents, and then the big question, though, obviously, is
right. But Jordan, that goes to what I'm saying is they think they've kind of done enough. They've achieved enough that what they have is good enough to keep improving.
Well, the big difference, though, from this year to last year is part of the reason you liked them to begin with was Anthony Richardson as a rookie quarterback, and he got off to a nice start, but he missed most of the season. So much of that turnaround was engineered by Gardner Minshew. The question is, does he add an extra layer of improvement to them, or will there be growing pains for a guy who's only played a handful of NFL games?
Well, much of the improvement was triggered by luck also. I mean,
Andrew Luck retired 5 years ago, so I don't know what you're talking about.
I think they finally escaped the shadow of Andrew Luck. And by the way, that's a big achievement in itself. I mean, whatever happens this year, you're going to look back to 2 years before and say, everyone was calling them the worst organization in football. They got a pretty good base of talent. But, Jordan, they were over 500 while being outscored. They were very lucky in a bunch of games. And I love Anthony Richardson. I particularly love his ability to avoid sacks, which can get you in big trouble as a rookie, especially with a bad line. But he's extremely raw, and he was hurt. So he's a huge question mark. Big upside. Don't know if we're going to see it this year. And right, by the way, who was their biggest signing? Raekwon Davis? I mean,
they had a good draft. They brought. I don't think they're going to fall super far under that total, but I respect that pick. I think it makes sense. I do like the follow. It's like the Giants the year before, right? Big exceeding of expectations, and then we know what happened last year. Tommy DeVito's playing quarterback half the year. Things
Yeah,
happen.
that's it. Yeah, well, they did sign Joe Flacco, so
Well, there
that's
you
a
go.
little bit of the roll of the dice too on age, if they're going to need him.
Right. Okay. Um, so I don't feel good making this pick because it's a team that I think definitely can win the Super Bowl, and I've loved their talent for years. But there's only two teams with an over under win total of 11.5 or higher. It's the Chiefs and then this team, the San Francisco 49ers. And this is mostly a play on the number. That's a big total. Winning 12 games requires a lot of things to go right in all the categories we're talking about. And the Niners have a lot of things working against them, okay? 18th in schedule strength, not good, not great. But the biggest thing is our pal Warren Sharp does his piece on rest advantages and disadvantages. And the Niners have a negative 21 rest disadvantage. It's the biggest disadvantage of the past decade. That matters in a physical sport like football. Warren Sharp has shown that these numbers matter in terms of how teams perform. So 21 days of disadvantage compared to opponents, that's huge, and that's going to hurt this team. Add in now the fact that whatever's happening with Brandon Ayuk, I don't expect him to be on the team in the end. That's a huge look. He's their deep threat. So much of what they do is underneath to Debo, run after the catch, underneath to McCaffrey, run after the catch. Without him to open the field, you're relying on rookies and unproven receivers to complement Debo Samuel. There was a lot of turnover on defense. They did bring in some other big names, but will they fit as well as Eric Armstead and company did? I don't know. There's just more uncertainty with this team than I'm used to feeling.
Look, Jordan, this is an extraordinary organization, right?
Mm-hmm.
But sooner or later, everybody runs into some strains over how to pay all of the players they want to keep. That's number one. Number two, they're chasing a very high over under. Like the final element of the analysis, you talked about all the factors we look at. We're pretty good now at saying who's good and who's bad. And not only that, who's going to do better and who's going to do worse. But in today's market, that's no longer enough to say you're going to beat your over under because the market is also improved at saying who's good, who's bad, and who's good. They're chasing a very high over under. I kind of feel the same way about Kansas City on a lowercase level, some turnover, some strains about who's going to get paid. Can they stay healthy? But also just this number hanging out there of they got to win 12 games to beat their over under. That's a tall order for any team to keep doing that year after year after year.
Yep. So I think it's look, they're an interesting team to watch. They do have a tough schedule. This is no knock on the Niners. Like you said, they're a great organization with a lot of talented players who are fun to watch and easily could be Super Bowl champions right now. 11.5 is just really high for a team with this many question marks going against them. So if those are our two sort of most confident picks, who else are we eyeing as teams that might be worth a play or two on the under?
Well, look, I start off with who in the most basic sense can you say did better than they should have last year? And the Bengals also over 500 while being outscored. The Bengals, third lowest number of games lost to injury. Despite what seems like a lot of chaos there, they had good injury luck. The Bengals, offensive line, they have attempted to bring in guys, but always in flux. Joe Burrow, always in trouble. Speaking of Joe Burrow, how's his wrist? Despite all of this stuff, the market, the odds makers and the public still love the Bengals. Their over under is 10.5. All right. There's a lot of question marks for a team that overperformed last year, has a lot of question marks. And by the way, who is in camp? Is Jamar Chase in camp? He's actually missing camp at this point, right? So that's talk about a high number hanging out there to beat for your over with a lot of question marks. I have question marks about the Bengals.
Here's the thing. I have a hard time putting too much stock in last season's numbers when Joe Burrow only played 10 games. They might, to me, injury luck goes out the door when one of the injuries is your, top 5 in the league quarterback. So I'm not sure. To me, he's just so good that if he's healthy, that makes a big difference.
Okay, but Amarius Mims, who they drafted number 1, to put right in front of Burrow is now out for several weeks, and it's an unclear diagnosis. The last quote I saw was more than two, fewer than many. That's concerning. I know they signed Trent Brown also, but that offensive line in front of that incredibly valuable player has been a problem spot for a long time. Not sure it's fixed.
Right. All right. I get the logic behind it. I'm not sure that's a bet I can make, but I'm happy to let you make it, and I'll root for you. Here's an interesting one that I've been looking at actually just today. Normally I wouldn't take it. It feels like a sucker bet. I wouldn't take a team with a very low total, but the Broncos are at 5.5 wins, and I'm struggling to find a way for them to get 6. The roster is worse than last season when they somehow overachieved to win 7 games. Is that right?
Yes. Yes.
No, they went 8-9 actually. Sorry, they're
the expected wins was 7 last year. Yeah, yeah.
So they've got a rookie quarterback. The roster is way worse. They've got the 8th hardest schedule in the league and a -17 rest advantage. It was the worst of anyone not named the 49ers. So there's just so many things working against this team. They've cut veterans to save cap money. They haven't replaced them with incoming talent for the most part. So this to me just feels like has every possibility of a massive tankathon, the team that's picking number 1 next year.
You want your fun Denver bet?
Sure.
Denver's plus 2,500 to go 0-17. I like that better than them hitting their over win total.
Wow. So I think you can make a play on Denver. The other interesting, I'm going back and forth on this one because Mike Tomlin, but otherwise Steelers to me are ripe for an under. We see the number is 8.5. Okay. And I know it's pretty rare when the Steelers go under 500, and I know they got Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, but this team also has some factors working. They have the hardest schedule in the league. That's number 32 of 32. That is a big, big factor. Obviously a very tough division. It depends how much you think Russell Wilson has left, first of all, right? And also they overachieved last year. They were only expected to win 7.9 games. Would they win 10?
Yeah.
And again, I guess I don't have enough of a belief in Russell Wilson and enough of belief that they would turn to Justin Fields quickly enough for them to maximize their upside. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, there's when we get into the middle of the season, you see things like Pittsburgh and games are expected to be low scoring on the road, and you look and you see Mike Tomlin has like a 70% winning percentage and stuff. There's some element of this where Tomlin has gotten the most out of his team for so long that we kind of expect Steelers to overperform their analytics by a little. I mean, I know that's kind of maybe anti-analytical to say, but it's just true, right? I mean, Peyton Manning won more games than his team scored points and allowed because he was managing those games. The Steelers always do a little better than we think they should, but it's a tall order. I mean, they won, like you said, they won more than 2 games over their expected wins last year. You can't keep expecting them to be that much better year after year after year.
Right. And look, trading Deontay Johnson, I'm not sure that was a great move. I'm not sure the Patrick Queen signing was worth the money. We always talk about if you improve over abysmal quarterback play, you have a boost, and whoever's behind center should probably be better than Kenny Pickett. And then we'll have to see what happens with Brandon Ayuk. For all we know, he could be on the team by the time this episode drops. But I just think there's when you're making these bets, you're looking to tell a story. And there's a path here where a couple of things go wrong and they go 8-9.
I'll just mention one thing. This is not going to be popular, but if you're going to tell a story and that's the story, Jordan, what's the gap between Jared Goff and Nate Sudfeld look like? I'm a little worried.
Is this your last under?
Yeah, Detroit was basically a 10-win team last year. They won 12 games. There's a lot of reason to celebrate. I get a little dubious every time someone attributes overperformance to something like really intense play or really great coaching. I mean, Mike Tomlin's one thing, but Detroit played a little bit over their heads last year, and I'm not sure everybody should be expecting them to do it again. I know they had a good offseason. I'm worried about the backup quarterback position. I'm worried at this point about how long Goff sustains what he's been doing. I don't know. I don't know that they're in that 49ers we're going to win 12 or 13 games or Chiefs class yet, and everyone's calling them a Super Bowl contender.
So Peter,
I have concerns.
first of all, the line's 10.5 here, which is important to mention,
Yes.
right? After Kansas City and San Francisco, there's about 5 teams at 10.5.
Yes, but you know
One
what
of
the
them is
talk and the hype is about Detroit right
no,
now.
but I don't agree with you at all, actually. First of all, I'm not making a bet based on what might happen if the starting quarterback gets hurt. You could do that to any team, okay? But I do not buy this narrative that you keep selling that the hype about Detroit is that Dan Campbell gets them so inspired. That's a talented team with an awesome offense that's well coordinated, great scheme, lots of talent. Gibbs and St. Brown and Laporta and maybe Jamison Williams breaks. So this team's a lot of talent. They fixed the back end of the defense. The secondary was a huge weakness. Huge. They won 12 games last year. So we're not asking them to put up some crazy win total that they haven't amassed before. I think 10.5 is perfectly fair for Detroit. So I am
Okay,
not
going
with you on
into this
one.
season, this baseball season, we said that the Baltimore Orioles had overperformed expectations last year, and they could keep improving, and they were a good team, and they could keep improving, but you should just set your baseline appropriately. Now, they did keep improving. They are a good team. Detroit is a good team. They could keep improving. All I'm saying is set your baseline of expectations at 10 wins from last year. If they did fix the back end of the defense, if that all works out, it's going to be great. Just don't expect that these guys are the Chiefs overnight. That's all I'm saying.
Well, you know what baseline of expectations we did hit, as always?
For
right.
each other?
Delivering a fantastic show, and we've got even more awesomeness coming your way right after this. And we're back. And as you're going to see all over your TVs for the next couple of weeks, the Little League Baseball World Series starts in Williamsport. It's a super fun event. Kids from all over the country, all over the world coming to Western Pennsylvania to play baseball. I've been very involved in Little League the past few years. It's a really interesting organization because it goes to the most local of local to this massive national event. But buried underneath the hoopla of what's happening on the TV level, the stardom level, is a major change at the core of Little League that could be terrible for underdogs. Peter, for ages, your eligibility to play in Little League has been determined first by where you live and then later by either where you live or where you go to school. You play in your local league. You're with your friends. You're with your community. It means something when that community advances in the national tournament, but also the primary focus of Little League is Little League. So that's who you're playing with for 3 months in the spring. Well, Little League last winter announced a new policy, and it's called League Choice. And now what's going to happen is for baseball and softball programs, kids who are between the ages of 4 and 7, so presumably first entering Little League, can now choose what league they want to play in. So that means if your town has a small league, maybe it doesn't have a chance in the district tournament to advance, and maybe it has some other flaws that you don't like, and there's a big scraping Little League nearby, and you like something else about it, you can go choose that league. Now, on the surface, that seems great, right? We want people to have choice. We want the better leagues. What this is going to do, though, is a couple things. First, it's going to kill the small little leagues that are barely holding on. And a lot of people I spoke to wonder if Little League, that's part of the purpose. Now, we asked representatives from Little League to come on the show today. They said that because the Little League World Series was starting, they're all busy. They said also our show is affiliated with gambling, so it's not a good look for them. Then I asked if they could respond to some written questions. They said they were too busy. So we can only speculate. They pointed us to an FAQ on their site that really doesn't answer any of these questions. The other huge problem, the thing I'm most concerned about, is this. I said to you, Peter, that ages 4 to 7 is when you can choose your league, right? Well, there's a loophole. Let's say you, Peter Keating, have a 5-year-old daughter who's looking to play softball for the first time, and you also have an 11-year-old baseball player who's the best pitcher in town. Well, if you sign up your daughter in a new league, guess who can follow her? That's right, the older brother, the older sibling. So if you don't think there are bad actors out there who saw their team get dominated in the district tournament by some stud in the neighboring town who know he has got a younger sibling and are offering, hey, come on over here, here's what we can do for you, then you're really naive about where youth sports is right now. So bottom line, Peter, and I've been talking a lot, I want to hear your thoughts, is I understand the intent. I understand that Little League is trying to fight a culture of more and more people opting for travel ball. I understand that they want people to be able to pick the best product, so they stay with Little League. But there is a massive law of unintended consequences attached to this that's really concerning.
So my first question is, how much of it is really unintended? How much of it is unintended, and how much of it is Little League wanting to be what the travel leagues or the semi-pro or pre-pro leagues are now? How much does Little League really want to stay or keep committed to the idea that what Little League is about kids going out their back doors, finding a school playground and needing equipment to play and needing opponents to play. So a bunch of volunteers from your town or your school or your neighborhood come together and set it up? Because is that just a 19th century fantasy now? Do we all have to be completely professionalized now? Do I have to have a younger brother who's better than I am that will make my team better in 2 years in order for me to join a team? Does my dad have to get paid under the table to play? How seamy and underbelly is Little League ripping open and deciding to go in and swim amidst? I mean, that's a disgusting metaphor, and I apologize, but this rouses all of my suspicions about unelected bureaucrats trying to cash in on the money-making aspect of a phenomenon rather than encouraging volunteers like you who spend your time just getting kids together to play a game.
No, that's not fair. This is not about a money-making situation.
Not yet. Not yet.
This is
But
not.
but in its scandalous aspect,
No, it's not.
could be.
Scandalous is too strong a word. It's Little League in some ways is fighting for its life because of travel ball. There are travel programs popping up everywhere, and more of the better kids may opt out of Little League to go play for the East Coast Gold Elite Superstars and so and so. So Little League wants to make sure that it's offering a product that attracts the best players while still being true to its core mission of baseball and softball for all. The problem is if you say, okay, again, I would have liked to have asked Little League this question. The speculation among those of us who are volunteers in this organization is that they wouldn't be upset if some of the smallest underperforming leagues folded and that it was the best leagues running things. They increased in size. Kids
Jordan,
went to those
I
leagues.
understand. You laid it out extremely well. What I'm saying is once you decide that it's your mission to attract the best players and stay competitive with travel teams, then what I'm saying is I believe it's a very straight line from there to not caring about all the other players, because somehow you're not just opening up things for fun games. You're trying to attract the best players. You have to figure out who the best players are. You have to figure out how to get to them. You have to recruit them. You have to keep them. I'm wondering if that's just gobbling up the rest of the mission, because that's what it sounds like.
Up to the individual leagues, right? Like Little League International would say, oh, we're not supporting that. In fact, Little League International still has some very arcane rules against travel play. So if you wanted to make a travel team within your Little League, it would have to exist as a separate organization, a separate bank account. You can't go and play a Little League team, even an all-star team can't go and play non-Little League teams. And that's hurting Little League, especially in the summer and the fall, because in a lot of that's when travel is big. And if a Little League tries to put together a summer or a fall program, a lot of times they don't have anyone to play because of those restrictions.
Right.
But what I would say is this, is there will be bad actors. I just think Little League is sort of saying, we're going to set up this great situation where parents can choose, and then we're going to whistle past the graveyard if anybody acts up and does anything untoward to try to influence where they go. So that's my biggest worry, is that the small local Little League will be gobbled up by the neighboring larger Little League. And that I don't think that's good for what this is all about.
Right. As you pointed out, choice is something we all want, but often a double-edged word in practice. Everybody who wants to volunteer and keep the volunteer spirit alive of the small Little Leagues, you get in there and help as much as you can. And I mean, Jordan, what would you do with your family if somebody comes recruiting for a bigger league the next town over with a better team?
I mean, look, I think we're a little bit away from that, but I can see sort of, certain communities that are on the border of two leagues.
Yeah.
I could see two leagues suddenly fighting over that entire community. And yes, one league eventually could go by the wayside. And this is one area where I don't think competition is good. I don't think this is going to hurt the volunteerism spirit of Little League or anything like that. But I do, again, worry about the underdogs, and those are the small leagues.